Hello and welcome to this video on doing meme research for English 101. I'm Jenny Dale. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the English librarian at UNCG. In this video, I'll be sharing some research tips for the meme research assignment, and the strategies and tools I show you will help you find sources for that annotated bibliography, but will also be applicable to other research that you do in class and in your life. In this video, I'll be describing the SIFT approach and the ABCD framework for source evaluation, which we can blend together to help us find the best sources when we're researching memes. I'll also demonstrate a potential approach to researching a political meme, highlight library resources that will be useful for your meme research assignment, and introduce you to your library assignment for Professor Bowman Abdi's English 101 class. Evaluating sources is a critical part of any research process, whether it's research in your personal life, research about who you're going to vote for, or research that you have for a class like this one. One approach you can use when you're trying to research claims made in a meme is a method that Mike Caulfield from the University of Washington calls SIFT. That stands for Stop, Investigate the Source, Find Better Coverage, or as I prefer to think of it, Find Other Coverage, and then trace claims, quotes, and media back to the original context. Rather than focusing on specific criteria for evaluating a source, Caulfield's encouraging an approach to evaluation and fact-checking that focuses on proactive behaviors on the part of the researcher. But I think that we can blend this approach with a specific framework for source evaluation that we talk about in English 101, the ABCD framework. This stands for authority, bias, currency, and documentation. As we're investigating sources, finding other coverage, and tracing claims, we can ask ourselves questions related to authority, like who created the source and what qualifies them to write about the subject. We can also ask questions related to bias, like does the creator or the publication seem to have an agenda, and could that agenda interfere with the accuracy or balance of the source? By the way, this is where the I in Caulfield's SIFT method becomes really important. We need to investigate the source by going outside of the source itself so that we can get the most accurate picture of potential biases. Mike Caulfield calls this lateral reading, meaning that we go beyond the source to learn about the source. When we're looking at currency, we can ask questions like how up to date is this source, and is that current enough for the topic at hand? We're researching political memes, and that means that we're probably going to want the most up-to-date information that we can find. Finally, with documentation, we're looking for some evidence of research. Did the author or creator do research? Did they give you citations, links, or some kind of informal reference to that research to let you know what research has been done? For research on political memes, you'll find lots of sources through Google, but the first step is to make sure that you really understand the meme you've chosen. An example I'll look at is this one about Nancy Pelosi. So there are a few things happening here. First, a claim that Nancy Pelosi wouldn't allow Congress to vote remotely, followed by a claim that she wants the entire nation to vote by mail. There's also a pretty unflattering image of Speaker Pelosi that takes up a lot of real estate on this meme. But what's really important for me and what I'm going to focus my research on are those claims about remote congressional voting and voting by mail for the 2020 election. So there are lots of ways that I could go about investigating this, but the first thing I want to do is find out if Nancy Pelosi actually opposed remote voting in Congress. So the nice thing about Google is that it uses natural language searching, so I can throw in relevant terms or questions, and its search algorithm tends to be able to kind of parse what I'm looking for. So I'm just going to search Nancy Pelosi Congress remote voting. And I get 1.3 million results, which is quite a lot. And I actually see from the first 3 results, 2 of them look like they are from fact-checking resources. So I'm going to skip those for now, and I'm going to jump into this one from The Intercept. And this article is called Remote Voting in Congress Isn't Just a Matter of Public Health, It's Necessary for Democrats to Wield Power. Nancy Pelosi has dragged her feet on remote voting to shore up her own influence, but she's ended up handing over substantial control to Republicans. So this is not a source that I am familiar with, so I am going to do a couple of things here. The first is I want to consider authority. So I do want to take a look at my authors, Astra Taylor and David Siegel. And the nice thing about most news websites is that you can click on an author's name and find more information about them. So Astra Taylor is a documentary filmmaker, writer, and political organizer, director most recently of What is Democracy, and the author of Democracy May Not Exist, but We'll Miss It When It's Gone. She also is a winner of a 2015 American Book Award and co-founder of the Debt Collective. That doesn't give me a lot of information about whether or not she is qualified to write about this particular topic, although it does sound like she's very interested in topics related to democracy. I can look also to see what else has she written for this particular publication, and it looks like she has written about other major current events that have been going on. But she doesn't have a lot of publications here at The Intercept. So one thing that I might want to do is go forward and do some searching about her. So there's a Wikipedia page about Astra Taylor and lots of other sources that it looks like she's written for. The Guardian, The Nation, The Baffler, which I am not familiar with. But the point here is really that we can take a look at our authors. We can investigate them a little further beyond just what they say about themselves in their short biographies. So I could go through a similar strategy with my other author here, David Siegel, who it tells me is the executive director of Demand Progress and a former member of the Rhode Island House of Representatives, where he organized that body's Progressive Caucus. So in the name of doing some lateral reading to learn more about my authors here, I'm going to do a Google search for this organization, Demand Progress. And there is the Demand Progress website where I could go directly and see what they say about themselves. But I'm actually going to go to the Wikipedia entry about them just to see if I can figure out kind of what they're all about. So Demand Progress is an internet activist related entity composing a 501c4 arm sponsored by the 1630 Fund and a 501c3 arm sponsored by the New Venture Fund. Online intensive and other grassroots activism to support internet freedom, civil liberties, transparency, and human rights, and in opposition to censorship and corporate control of the government. So one of the things that can be really useful when you are looking into an organization is you can find a Wikipedia entry about them, which tends to give you some more detailed information. I can also look and see if there are any other organizations or other publications that have talked about Demand Progress. One that tends to come up a lot with nonprofits related to political concerns is this one called Influence Watch. Says this one is a left of center organization that advocates for policies relating to foreign policy and civil liberties. So just by doing some of that, what we would call, or what Mike Caulfield would call, lateral reading, we can learn more about the perspective that our authors have and make some determinations about whether or not that makes them more trustworthy, less trustworthy, or doesn't really impact the way that we feel about them. And I'm going to go back to the article itself, and I am going to start looking for more information here. So I will say that by researching those authors, we have potentially identified some of their biases that they might have that might be in play in this article. We can also research this publication, The Intercept, the same way that we did with our authors. And again, I'm going to skip their own website because I want to learn what other people are saying about them. And once again, I see a Wikipedia entry. The Intercept is an online left-leaning publication of First Look Media owned by Pierre Omidyar, and it tells me the author or the editors. It's been published in English since its founding, which looks like it was in 2014, and it's been published in Portuguese since 2016. So I can find information about who they are, who's behind it, some of the controversies and scandals, what the U.S. government reaction was to them. It looks like there was a situation with The Intercept having leaked classified document details. So you can actually learn a lot more about a publication or an organization by going outside of their website and seeing what other people have said or revealed about them. So I know that this is left-leaning based on what I've seen online, and that will probably have an impact on potential bias in this story itself. But as I'm going through here, it looks like a pretty well documented article. There are some quotes. There are links out to other sources from the Intercept itself, sources from the president's Twitter account. I saw several links to the New York Times, which we would usually consider to be an important newspaper of record. Lots and lots of documentation is happening here, so I do feel pretty good about that. I'm going to look back up at the top because I wasn't paying too close of attention to the date. Okay, so it's from May 12th, 2020. That's pretty recent. I am recording this video in September of 2020, but things have certainly changed since then, especially considering changes that have had to be made because of the current COVID-19 pandemic. So we might need to try to find something a little more updated. But what we do find from this is that at least at the beginning, at least at this point in time, there seemed to have been some reticence on Nancy Pelosi's part to not allow remote voting in Congress, thinking back to that first fact that we wanted to check. So I'm going to head back here and I'm going to use one of these fact-checking results that came up. I'm going to use PolitiFact just because it's one that I like. And as I am looking through, I see this Facebook post, which has the same sort of idea exactly pretty much as the meme that we're looking at. Nancy Pelosi said Congress shall not vote remotely because it is not secure, while also saying that Americans should all vote for president by mail. So we can look to see what the researchers at PolitiFact had to say about this. We can see their sources, we can see how they fact-checked this information, and that's one of the things that I really like about them. They're sponsored by the Poynter Institute, which is a nonprofit journalism organization. But if we look, it goes into a bit more depth and talks us through a timeline here. So some interviews from March and April about some reticence to or reluctance to participate in remote voting or allow remote voting, and then sort of shows how her perspective on this changed over time, including May 20th, just after our Intercept article was published, when she actually did authorize a 45-day period during which House members could vote remotely or by proxy. So they come to the conclusion here in PolitiFact that the post, which we could also think of as our meme, contains an element of truth, but it is mostly false because she did change her perspective on this over time. All right, so that's an example of how I might start doing some research online for a claim that's made in a meme. And I try to talk through a bit about how I used both that ABCD framework and that SIFT approach, that idea of looking beyond the source that you are trying to evaluate to really find out more information about it. If you have questions about any of that, please feel free to contact me as your English librarian. My email address is jedale2@uncg.edu. But before we go today, I do want to show you a couple of resources that are going to be linked from your library research guide. So your library research guide is available at uncg.libguides.com/ENG101/memes. And I'm going to head there now and just show you some of the resources that are available. First off, I'll go ahead and point out right up at the top of this page here is where you can link to your library assignment, which is a Google form. It does require you to be logged in with your UNCG email so that you can get credit for completing the assignment. You'll fill this out, and then you will get some feedback from me about the sources that you've chosen. All right, but back on the page itself, There's information here about how to use the guide, including links to some of these more general tabs across the top of the page. And one that I really want to point out to you is this Evaluating Evidence tab, where we have some information here about evaluating sources using that ABCD model that we talked about. But back on our meme research guide, here we go. I have some information here linked about SIFT and 4 Moves in a Habit, which is just sort of a rewording of SIFT that Mike Caulfield came up with. I have some in this middle box here, this finding sources. I have some useful web resources, including fact-checking resources like factcheck.org and PolitiFact, which we looked at, as well as Project VoteSmart, which is a great place to get information about candidates, and Pew Research Center, which is an awesome place to find statistics to help you as you're fact-checking or as you're doing research on the claims made by your memes. I also have a link here to different library databases that could be useful to you for finding information for your research project. A library database is basically a searchable collection of information, and usually a searchable collection of articles. The one that I want to show you today is called Academic Search Complete, and it's one of my favorites. So what I'm going to do here in Academic Search Complete is I'm just going to start with a search for Nancy Pelosi. Using Google is great for being able to fact check those recent claims, the facts and statistics that you might find in memes. Library databases might help you do that, which would be great, but are also going to give you articles and other resources that can give you a fuller picture on maybe the subject of your meme. So in this case, what I'm actually looking for is just some more information on Nancy Pelosi. And I have over 4,000 results that come up, which is quite a lot. But maybe, again, I want to think about my currency. Nancy Pelosi has been active as a politician for a long time, so I see articles about her going back to 1985. Let's just bump this up and say that we're interested in stuff from this current presidential term. So just looking from 2016 to 2010. Still almost 1,000 results, but what I might want to do here is start taking a look through some of the articles to see what I can find about Nancy Pelosi. And I see lots of articles that just are about her. It looks like maybe interviews or information. So I can start adding new terms to my search to help me figure out more information. Doing a search for Nancy Pelosi, and I'm going to add Democratic Party. And that gives me just under 100 results. And I see a lot of these results are coming from magazines. I see maybe some newspaper sources here that all deal in some way with Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party, the party that she represents. So I want to point out here that I built my search a little bit differently than I did in Google. In Google can kind of put lots of words together. I can ask questions. I can really do searching the way that I would talk or think through a topic. Whereas in a library database like this one, it's important to focus on specific terms and connect them with these ands that are built in here. So I'm just going to take a look at this first one from Time Magazine, Staying Power, a cover story from Time Magazine. And I see in the abstract here, the article profiles U.S. Representative Nancy Pelosi of California, discussing her status within the Democratic Party and perception of her from the Republican Party. Now, I could see this being really useful for me because I can tell by the content of my meme that it is something that is kind of coming from a more right-leaning or Republican-leaning person. Because of the way that Nancy Pelosi is portrayed. So finding some information about how she's perceived within the Republican Party could actually be really helpful for me. It also tells me that particular attention is given to Pelosi's criticism of U.S. President Donald Trump. So I can scroll down to read this article here, or I can get a PDF. This is my recommendation when you are using sources that you might want to quote from. because when you have the PDF, it's clearer and easier to see which specific page certain information is from. So if I decide that I like this article, it seems like it has some good information that I could use. It also has this nice timeline that I could potentially use here to see if I can make some statements about Nancy Pelosi and her history as a political figure. So if I like this, I'm going to go back to this page here that had the information about it, and I am going to email it to myself. This is always my recommendation when it's an option in a database, because if you email it to yourself, put my email address in there, Nancy Pelosi article, it will email me a permalink back to this page, which I'll get back to in a minute. I can ask it to attach the PDF of the article, which I love, and then I can also ask it to send me an MLA citation. And I can use the MLA citation that this sends me as a good starting point, and then check it against some of the citation resources that are on that English 101 research guide to help me make sure that it's accurate. So I can do that, and then I will have all three of those things, that permalink, the PDF, and an MLA citation. Now, if I don't want to email it to myself, what I can do is grab a permalink. You don't want to save the link here, especially if you're working remotely and you're not on campus, because you can kind of tell how long and convoluted this link is here. What you want is something that's called a permalink or a stable URL. And in Academic Search Complete and other databases that look like it, when you're on an article page like this, you can click permalink and you can copy and paste that full link. On your English 101 research guide, specifically on your memes page that I created, I have this little guide linked here to creating permalinks. And this just shows you how you can create permalinks from our different library databases, including the ones that are linked on your English 101 memes research guide right here. That's just a brief overview of how to use Academic Search Complete. Back here on your research guide, this is where the new video, the one I'm creating right now, will be in this space. But we have these resources here for you, and they'll be up all semester. If you have any questions at any point about finding sources or using sources, or if you have questions about completing that library assignment that you'll need to be logged in to complete so that you can get credit, please feel free to contact me. My email address is jedale2@uncg.edu, and happy research.